The ground shook without warning, and within minutes the entire world was watching Mexico. If you live in California, or if you have ever worried about California, this is a video you need to watch through to the end. Because what scientists have revealed in recent weeks could fundamentally change how seriously you take the ground beneath your feet. Hit subscribe now so you are the first to know when the next major update drops. This story is not over. It is only just beginning. On the morning of July 17, 2026, the southern Pacific coast of Mexico, near the state of Chiapas, was struck by an earthquake that rattled millions of people across the region. According to the USGS, the earthquake registered a magnitude of 7.3. It struck approximately 48 kilometers southwest of a small coastal town called Aquilas Cerdán, originating at a depth of 15 kilometers beneath the ocean floor. The time was 9:48 in the morning, local time. This was not a minor tremor. Earthquakes in this magnitude range are capable of causing severe destruction anywhere in the world, and the effects did not stay confined to Mexico. People in Guatemala, El Salvador, and even Mexico City, hundreds of kilometers from the epicenter, felt the ground move beneath them. High-rise buildings swayed across the capital. In Guatemala City, residents panicked and evacuated their buildings. Video footage captured a wall collapsing at a bus terminal in Quetzaltenango. People abandoned their vehicles in the middle of roads and ran on foot. The first official response was a tsunami warning. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center issued an alert for hazardous tsunami waves along the coastal areas of Mexico and Guatemala. For several hours, residents near the shoreline were instructed to move immediately to higher ground. The warning was ultimately canceled a few hours later, though authorities advised continued caution as sea level fluctuations were expected to persist. So why did this earthquake happen? To understand that, you need to look beneath the surface. This part of Mexico sits on one of the most seismically active boundaries on Earth. Here, a tectonic plate known as the Cocos plate is being driven underneath the North American plate in a process called subduction. These two plates are in constant collision, converging at a rate of approximately 76 millimeters per year. When they lock against each other and then suddenly slip, enormous amounts of stored energy are released all at once. That release is what we feel as an earthquake. This is not a new or unusual location for major seismic events. According to USGS data, more than 50 earthquakes of magnitude 7.0 or greater have struck along this plate boundary in Central America since 1950. Within 250 kilometers of today's epicenter alone, 7 major earthquakes have occurred over the past several decades, including a magnitude 7.3 in 1970, a magnitude 7.2 in 1993, and most significantly, a magnitude 8.2 earthquake in 2017 that killed approximately 20 people and triggered a destructive regional tsunami. Today's magnitude 7.3 event struck directly at the southern edge of that same 2017 rupture zone. The ground had offered early signals before the main event. 2 small foreshocks were recorded in the preceding days, a magnitude 4.1 on July 14th, and a magnitude 4.7 just 88 minutes before the main earthquake. These can only be identified as foreshocks in hindsight. It remains impossible to reliably predict a major earthquake in advance by monitoring small tremors alone, and that distinction matters. The seismic sequence did not end with the main shock either. At least 10 aftershocks followed, ranging between magnitude 4.9 and 6.0, events that would qualify as significant earthquakes in their own right in many parts of the world. Now for the question that matters most: was there loss of life or major structural damage? Fortunately, early reports indicate no major destruction and no confirmed deaths. Only 2 injuries have been reported across southern Mexico. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum confirmed that initial assessments showed no significant damage. USGS estimated total economic losses at less than 1% of Mexico's GDP, suggesting that buildings and infrastructure performed reasonably well under the stress. But the danger has not fully passed. USGS scientists have flagged a severe risk of liquefaction in the affected region. Liquefaction occurs when water-saturated soil loses its structural integrity during shaking and begins to behave like a liquid, causing buildings to tilt, sink, or collapse from beneath. Older structures built from mud brick or adobe are especially vulnerable to this phenomenon. Authorities have urged residents to remain cautious in the days ahead, as aftershocks capable of triggering additional damage can continue for weeks following a major subduction zone earthquake. Now let us get to the question this video is built around. What does any of this mean for California? This is not sensationalism. It is a completely valid scientific question for anyone who understands even the basics of the Pacific Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire is a massive horseshoe-shaped zone encircling the Pacific Ocean, home to the majority of the world's major earthquakes and active volcanoes. Japan, Indonesia, the Philippines, Alaska, and the entire western coast of North America, including California, all fall within this zone. Mexico's Chiapas region is part of the same ring. So whenever a major earthquake strikes anywhere along this boundary, the natural question follows: could this trigger something elsewhere? Here is the scientifically honest answer, and I want to be precise, because this distinction matters. Berkeley Seismology Lab scientists have been clear on this point. The fact that two locations both fall within the Ring of Fire does not mean they share a direct tectonic connection. California's San Andreas fault is a transform fault, where two plates slide horizontally alongside each other. What happened off the Chiapas coast was a thrust fault event in a subduction zone where one plate is being driven beneath another. These are fundamentally different tectonic mechanisms, and there is no established direct connection between them. If someone tells you that Mexico's earthquake has created a direct seismic threat to California, that claim is not supported by the science. But, and this is the most important part of this video, that does not mean California is safe. California, for entirely separate reasons, rooted in its own fault systems, is currently in one of the most elevated risk periods in its recorded history. And that is not speculation. It is what the science published this year has demonstrated. In June 2026, a team led by geophysicist Dr. Lilian Burkhardt from the University of Bern, Switzerland, published a landmark study drawing on 10,000 years of geological history, using radiocarbon dating, sediment layer analysis, and tree ring data to measure how much stress has accumulated on two of Southern California's most dangerous fault systems, the San Andreas Fault and the San Jacinto Fault. The findings were striking. At the junction of these two faults, particularly near an area known as Cajon Pass, stress levels are currently at their highest recorded point in over 1,000 years. The amount of energy stored underground has not been this high in more than a millennium. Why does that matter? Because when two major fault systems reach peak stress simultaneously, researchers are concerned that a rupture on one fault could cascade directly onto the other. Like a chain of dominoes, scientists have named this vulnerability an earthquake gate. If such a linked rupture were to occur, the resulting earthquake could reach a magnitude of 7.4 to 7.8, with destruction spreading across a wide corridor from north of Los Angeles through San Bernardino, Riverside, and the Coachella Valley simultaneously. Professor Ahmed Elbana of the University of Southern California, commenting on this research, described it as a powerful reminder that Southern California sits on a multi-strand fault system where the risk is not theoretical. It is real and measurable. Researcher Bridget Smith-Conter of Northern Arizona University added that this is not a time for complacency. Preparation is not optional, and there is more. A separate study published in May 2026 introduced an even more concerning possibility. Researchers found evidence suggesting that California's San Andreas Fault and the Pacific Northwest's Cascadia Subduction Zone, a separate but geographically nearby fault system, could be capable of synchronizing with each other. Under certain stress conditions, a rupture on one system could trigger movement on the other within minutes or hours. turning what would already be a catastrophic event into a multi-region disaster unfolding across different cities at the same time. The Cascadia Subduction Zone, where the Juan de Fuca plate slides beneath the North American plate, is capable of producing megathrust earthquakes reaching magnitude 9.0, among the most powerful and destructive seismic events in recorded human history. There is one more piece of evidence worth understanding here. The southernmost section of the San Andreas fault near the Salton Sea last ruptured in approximately 1680, more than 340 years ago. That segment has not released its accumulated stress since. In earthquake science, a seismic gap of this length is considered a serious warning indicator. The longer the interval without rupture, the greater the energy building underground toward an eventual release. A few weeks ago, a cluster of small tremors was recorded near the Salton Sea, with the largest reaching magnitude 4.3. USGS issued a temporary elevated risk advisory for the region, which was later lifted as activity returned to background levels. But swarm sequences like this are a consistent reminder that the fault system below Southern California is never truly dormant. When you bring all of these elements together, today's magnitude 7.3 in Mexico, the 1,000-year high stress levels on the San Andreas and San Jacinto faults, the potential synchronization with Cascadia, and the recent Salton Sea swarm, a clear picture emerges. California is in a period of genuinely elevated seismic risk, independent of and parallel to what happened in Mexico today. These are two separate stories unfolding simultaneously, and that convergence is precisely what makes this moment worth paying close attention to. Now, one thing every responsible science communicator must say clearly: no seismologist, no research institution, and no government agency can tell you that a major earthquake will strike on a specific date, at a specific time, in a specific location. That level of precision remains beyond the current reach of earthquake science. What scientists do instead is estimate probability across longer time windows, over the next 30 years or the next 50 years, based on accumulated geological evidence. It is also worth addressing a few common misconceptions directly, because they circulate widely on social media, and they are worth correcting. The idea that small earthquakes are beneficial because they release stress and prevent larger ones is false. Small earthquakes release such a tiny fraction of accumulated energy that they cannot meaningfully reduce the risk of a larger event. The idea that certain weather conditions cause earthquakes is also false. Earthquakes originate from geological processes deep underground. Surface weather has no role in triggering them, and the persistent Hollywood-inspired notion that California will eventually sink into the ocean is simply not supported by geology. The San Andreas is a transform fault where plates slide alongside each other horizontally. No mechanism exists for California to slide beneath the ocean. So, if exact prediction is not possible, what should you actually do with this information? The answer is preparedness, and it is specific, practical, and achievable. According to the USGS shakeout scenario, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake along the San Andreas fault would affect approximately 300,000 buildings across Southern California. Of those, roughly 1,500, about 1 in every 200, are estimated to fully collapse. The more common danger in a major earthquake is not building collapse. It is objects falling during shaking, gas line ruptures triggering fires, and the failure of critical infrastructure, including water, power, and transportation networks. Here is what you should do now before anything happens. Assemble an emergency kit containing at least 72 hours of food, water, and essential medications for every member of your household. Establish a family communication plan in advance, including a designated out-of-area contact that everyone can reach if local networks become overwhelmed, which is extremely common in the immediate aftermath of a major earthquake. Identify the safest locations in every room of your home, under sturdy furniture, away from windows, heavy shelving, and anything overhead that could fall. If your home was built before 1980, have it evaluated for seismic retrofitting, since older structures generally perform significantly worse under strong shaking than buildings constructed to modern codes. And if you have not already done so, sign up for Shake Alert or your regional earthquake early warning system. Even a few seconds of advance notice before the strongest shaking arrives can be enough time to protect yourself. During an earthquake, the established guidance is consistent. Drop to the ground immediately. Take cover under a sturdy table or against an interior wall away from windows, and hold on until the shaking completely stops. If you're driving, slow down gradually and pull over in an open area away from bridges, overpasses, and power lines. Returning to Mexico. The seismic sequence there is not finished. Aftershocks following major subduction zone earthquakes can continue for weeks, and any individual aftershock can itself cause significant damage, particularly to structures already weakened by the main event. Emergency response systems across Mexico, Guatemala, and El Salvador remain active. Authorities are monitoring for landslides and soil liquefaction in the most vulnerable areas. It is worth noting that following the devastating magnitude 8.2 earthquake in 2017, Mexico significantly upgraded both its building codes and its early warning infrastructure. That investment almost certainly contributed to the comparatively limited loss of life reported today, despite the earthquake's substantial magnitude. Mexico's SASMEX system, one of the oldest earthquake early warning networks in the world, was operational during today's event, giving residents in affected areas those critical seconds to take cover before the strongest shaking arrived. California operates a similar system called Shake Alert, which sends alerts directly to mobile phones. Both systems rely on the same fundamental principle. P waves, the faster but less damaging type of seismic wave, are detected first, triggering alerts before the more destructive S waves arrive at the surface. There are a few additional questions that come up consistently after events like this, and they deserve direct answers. Was this earthquake caused by human activity, such as fracking or mining? No. This was a natural subduction zone event, driven by tectonic processes that have been occurring for centuries, with no contribution from human activity. Is climate change increasing the frequency of earthquakes? Research on this question is ongoing, but no strong evidence currently links climate change directly to increases in tectonic seismic activity. Rising sea levels may incrementally increase coastal liquefaction and tsunami risk over time, but that is a separate mechanism from earthquake generation itself. Are we close to the big one in California? The honest answer is that nobody knows precisely. What the science does confirm is that stress is elevated, seismic gaps exist, and the consequences of a major rupture would be severe. The when remains beyond the reach of science. The appropriate response to that uncertainty is not fear. It is preparation. One more thing worth addressing directly. Social media fills rapidly with misinformation after events like this. Posts claiming to predict the exact date and time of future earthquakes, old footage presented as current, unofficial accounts presenting themselves as authoritative sources. Please rely on official channels for your information, the USGS, your National Seismological Service, and your country's Emergency Management Authority. Anyone claiming to predict the precise timing of a future earthquake is making a claim that current science cannot support. Behind every magnitude number is a human experience. In Guatemala City, families stood in parking lots in their pajamas as aftershocks continued. In Tapachula, shopkeepers stood outside their stores checking walls for cracks. Bus drivers pulled over on highways, uncertain whether it was safe to continue. These moments rarely make international headlines when damage stays limited. But for the people living through them, the minutes after the shaking stops are filled with real uncertainty and fear. That dimension of these events is worth remembering. It is also worth understanding why the same magnitude can produce dramatically different outcomes in different places. The raw magnitude number tells you how much energy was released at the source. What people actually experience on the surface depends on depth, distance from the epicenter, and critically, the type of ground beneath them. Soft, loose soil amplifies shaking far more than solid bedrock, a phenomenon known as site amplification. This is why Mexico City, sitting on the bed of an ancient drained lake, feels earthquakes from distant epicenters so intensely. And it is why two neighborhoods in the same city, built on different soil types, can experience significantly different levels of shaking from the identical event. In California specifically, areas built along active fault traces or on soft sedimentary basins, such as parts of the San Fernando Valley and the Los Angeles Basin, face elevated shaking hazard compared to areas built on solid granite bedrock. Checking your local seismic hazard zone map through the California Geological Survey is a straightforward step that can tell you specifically what to expect in your area. Let us take a step back to the bigger picture. Beneath the ground, tectonic plates are always in motion, shifting a few centimeters each year, roughly the rate at which human fingernails grow. When plates lock against each other, stress builds across that boundary over years, decades, and centuries, until it eventually overcomes the friction holding it in place. That release is what we call an earthquake. From a human perspective, it feels sudden and violent. From the Earth's perspective, it is simply a step in a process that has been unfolding for hundreds of millions of years. This is why scientists consistently frame major earthquakes not as surprises, but as inevitabilities. The question is never whether a significant earthquake will occur along a stressed fault system. The question is only when. And since no one can answer that question with precision, the only rational response is to be ready before the question becomes relevant. Let us close with the core facts. A magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck off the coast of Chiapas, Mexico on July 17, 2026, caused by the subduction of the Cocos plate beneath the North American plate. It triggered a tsunami warning that was subsequently canceled, and has so far resulted in only 2 confirmed injuries with no major structural collapse reported. This region has a well-documented history of major earthquakes, including the magnitude 8.2 event in 2017. Separately, California currently faces its own elevated seismic risk, supported by research showing stress levels on the San Andreas and San Jacinto faults at their highest point in over 1,000 years, alongside new findings suggesting the potential for synchronization between the San Andreas fault and the Cascadia Subduction Zone. These are 2 separate stories, but together they paint a clear and sober picture of how active the Pacific Ring of Fire remains in 2026. The Earth stores its energy for centuries and releases it in seconds. We cannot stop that process. What we can control is how prepared we are when it arrives. If you found this breakdown useful, share it with anyone you know in California, Mexico, or any seismically active region. Subscribe and enable notifications so you are informed the moment the next significant update emerges. And before you close this video, take one concrete step toward preparedness. Check your emergency kit, update your family communication plan, or look up your local seismic hazard map. These are small actions, but they are the ones that genuinely matter when the ground finally moves. Stay safe, stay informed, and I will see you in the next one.